from way out at sea. I love it. Look at that. They've just been circling me ever since I've come. They come back. We're going to hear them all through the reading. Here they come again. Let's see. Coming back. Or maybe not. Well, there they go overhead. These ones are quiet, though. Here they come. There's a couple of surfers. They don't like my action, I don't think. Well, here they go. Now they're going to start to settle. Here they come. It's like a tornado of turns. All right. Let's get started. It's time to read from Going Alone. So let me set up my little camera. Boink, that goes there. Hope everybody's doing well. Oh boy. Creaky old bones. There we go. We'll probably hear the turns all through this reading. They've been flying off and then making lots of squawking, and then they come back. Today we're going to read from chapter 2. There, I've done it. I've called it a chapter. I don't know what I have this aversion to calling my the titles of my book, the sections, chapters. I got in this habit of calling them sections. Oh my gosh, look at that. A tern has pooped on my book. That's interesting. Wow, I wish I could take a photo of that. Maybe I'll take a snapshot of it later. So good job. Well, maybe I'll get pooped on my head too. Let's see. Well, I'll leave it there, but I'll wind up in my hands. That brings good luck. I guess it does, yeah. But I'm going to wipe it off, otherwise it'll end up all over my hands. Yeah. I'll wipe it on my towel, which I'll then wipe on my body later. The poopy version. So anyway, when I first started writing Going Alone, I didn't plan to write a book. And when I started to see that there were chapters coming up, I was like, this ain't a book. So I'm not going to call these chapters. I call them sections. And to this day, I have a hard time calling them chapters, even though the book is certainly book length. See, I still, even in the thing there, I still call it sections, right? Endless Wealth says, I haven't talked with you in quite a few years, right before you moved to America with your family, and I do greatly appreciate all that you do, my friend. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you very much, Endless Waltz. And hi, David Edgar, about the good luck. All right, so well, if you haven't been around since then, give me another 15 months, and I'll be back in Japan. Yeah, but then in about another 9 months, I'm going to be living on the road. So hopefully this will be interesting again. This kind of this dull life that I've been living, this workaday life, which is the thing that you have to do, right? Especially when you're raising a kid, gotta do the time in the coal mine. Hey, but my time is almost up. 36 years, 37. It'll be 37 next year. 37 years of hard labor, and then I can call it quits. But let's read chapter 2, the cast. And this is the section that I added when my friend Cindy, who had read an early version of the book, it didn't have that section, the cast. And she said, Kurt, your book has so many characters and places, it's hard to keep track of all these things. She suggested that I add a glossary to the end of the book. And I did. That's why I said, that's a great idea, Cindy. So I went ahead and I wrote the glossary. It was basically meant to be like just that, a glossary at the end with titles of all the things and a description. And then when it was all done, I realized, this really is integral enough and it's important enough to put it up front and make it a part of the book, not a glossary, but a chapter of its own, so that I could set the stage for what's to come. Now, it's been interpreted since then as redundant in some ways, because in subsequent chapters I define these same things again. But that's all right with me, because sometimes it takes a couple of times for something to set in. So I'll accept that redundancy. There's the lifeguard going by. Oh, he's going to go right through the birds. There they go. And the turns are off on flying again, right up behind my head. Ain't that cool? They never get any rest. Okay, let's read chapter 2, the cast, where we're going to introduce all the various elements of the book. Round 2. I love it. The cast. Characters, places, and concepts within my book. And a quote. What an immeasurable, limitless desert this is. What could you deduce here of God's purpose? What, in this dead emptiness, is He permitting? In this blank terrain, inimical to life, all-consuming, all-consumed, totally burnt up and out, totally unsupportive of humanity's self-belief. This fragment or segment of a world self that is not, this corpse which, never since the earth was born, has given its creator a single word in return. Henrik Ibsen, very old, kind of a lost bit of literature that I had discovered there, and that I worked my way through. It was a difficult read, and then when I encountered that bit, I went, oh my gosh, gee, that's perfect. So I grabbed that and put that right in there. That's a really good quote to summarize this bit of the book. Let's go. And by the way, this is probably the only section of the book that is brute force prose. Most of the rest of the book is about half to a quarter prose. Prose by meaning something I sat down and made a conscious effort to try to write, versus what I call the muse blurbs, right? The blurbs, the inspiration that kind of struck me from my muse, so to speak, my dead muse. They required no effort whatsoever and came out perfect the first time, never needing any further editing. This book requires a brute force edit. This is probably the only chapter in the whole book that's like that. Here we go. Oh, and there's a picture up at the front my daughter made of Siberia Ghost Town and the tire at the entrance there to the ghost town. Let us begin with an introduction to the places and characters which play a role in my story of going alone. Some of these will figure notably in the book, while others are only mentioned briefly or not at all, or may only appear elsewhere, such as in my other writings or within the many videos I have made and shared about the deep wilderness settings which I have explored in Japan and America. Each of these places and characters are important to me for their use as landmarks, symbols, or analogy to the ideas I wish to convey. And as we proceed through this book, I would like you to imagine 4 separate regions where these places and characters exist as elements of the story I want to tell. The first region is this civilization we enjoy and share, even if you and I are separated now by vast space and time, and which is the common bond between my writing these words and your reading of them. I do not think I need to speak much of this civil place and circumstance between us, given the fact that it is our common human heritage, even if I am from California and you are from Istanbul. This shared resource of human connection is something we both know, enjoy, and may sometimes struggle to find and maintain a place within. It is our civilization and our community and our people and our home. This is the place from which we will start. It is the setting out point for this adventure of going alone. Do not lose sight of it. Never forget what it is, how important this grounding will always be to the well-lived life, to the social life, to the good life. That's a really important element. So that's the foundation of the adventure, right? These common circumstance of civilization. From there, the next step. There's 4 levels, remember. The next 3 regions of potential exploration are settings increasingly removed from civilization, places elsewhere and far away, distant and remote to our common understanding and the comfort of what we know is true. You and I are both aliens of a sort in these less explored places, especially when we go alone, and especially when we go alone where there are no roads, trails, paths, or opportunity of help, or where the connection, security, and comfort we've left behind are now truly out of reach. At the near edge of this vast and mostly universal wild, there is a crossing over point and borderland which I call the edge of deep water. It is a high point between civilization and the deeper wilds. Just pause for a second. That note of high point was deliberate in my mind. The very first time I found I actually saw or apprehended the great indifference was when that young boy scaring the turns again, was when I was hiked to a high point there in the Black Mountains. And then again when I got to the high point at the edge of Siberia Ghost Town. So it really literally was a high point. At the edge of this vast and mostly universal wild, there's a crossing over point and borderland which I call the edge of deep water. It is a high point between civilization and the deeper wilds, a place where we can at once see, hear, and otherwise perceive both the last vestiges of our home and community in the near distance behind us, as well as the empty lands of wildness dead ahead and down below. Dead ahead and down below. This edge of deep water is someplace we can indeed visit, and if we are lucky, and if we go alone, then just maybe we can catch a glimpse of the terrible thing I call the great indifference, which is defined further in this book. See what I said about, I kind of define it here, but then it gets defined again and again, probably 3 times. And I'm all right with that. I know that that's not good literary style to say the same thing again, but in a way it's an important element. And I don't say the exact same words again. I describe it from the point of preparation, and then again from the point of adventure, and then again from the point of impact. I recommend going no further than this edge. So imagine this, you're at the edge, right? You're at the edge of civilization, at the edge of deep water looking down. I recommend going no further than, and this is a lot of theoretical stuff, and it can be practical and in fact, but a lot of it is kind of psychological. I recommend going no further than this edge if you are timid or scared. This is important if you don't want to have your life ruined, or not willing to risk or to lose or to die seemingly too soon. Don't go if you're really afraid. This is my very real and sincere warning to you. I am not trying to seem dramatic or to simply entertain you with dangerous sounding cautions. This is really true. Death and something possibly much worse can really find you when you perceive the great indifference. Do not go alone to the edge of deep water if you do not really want to know. And if you do go, then go alone and do not try to follow me. If you will not find what is not out there if you do. Next, 3. And beyond the edge of deep water comes the deep water wilderness itself. This is where most of the remaining characters and places in this book are found. They are landmarks, as I said, and though they are indeed real, excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze. Pardon me. It does not really, and though they are indeed real, it does not really matter if you find them. In fact, you are better off discovering such things in a desert of your own seeking. Go somewhere else. Go find something else. Take your own scary risks. Do not seek the places and things which I have found and have related here. Do not look for the great indifference just where I found it, as it will be hard to see with the echo of my past passage blinding your view and confounding your footsteps. And if you do go where I once went, and then successfully locate any of the landmarks, such as the Watcher, or the Miner, or Campo No. 1, or the Home of Faith, or even Mount Wildness itself, which I haven't even been to, then I'll bet you'll stand there and say to yourself, why the hell did I come here? And what was Kurt talking about? This is nothing. And so it'll be nothing to you. That is because even if you went to my places all by yourself, you did not truly go alone. This last place on my indistinct map of regions is the great indifference itself, which is both beyond and within the deepwater wilderness. It is everywhere, in fact, only we can see it better the further we get out there in the desert. It's in the mountains too, and in the sea, and where you work and where you live, though you can't very well perceive such empty in those places due to the clutter of life and the artifacts of living. To perceive the great indifference clearly, you will need a desert, and you will need to go far, far beyond your own edge of deep water. Give one last look back before you proceed, going down and into your own deep water, and then beyond. Do you see it out there? If so, then now what? Read on to learn how I answered this particular question in my own life which is the substance and subject of my own book and story. In fact, I almost got there in Japan. In those 11 years, what was it, 13 years, I don't know, however many years I was there, softypapa almost got there. I couldn't get past, though, because it was too crowded with life in the mountains. And even the abandoned Japan stuff wouldn't do it. I needed a desert, literally, to reach it. And so if I hadn't come back to America, it wouldn't have happened. If I hadn't come back to America, my life would have just kind of devolved down into kind of a very dull, seemingly at an end of life feeling, closing in on 60, versus now where I feel more alive and vital and full of potential than at any point in my life. Sort of the clock's ticking down, but I'm in good shape. My mind is sound, my values are straight, and my energy and ambition are just at 110%. That would not have happened had I not done this. That would not have happened if I hadn't left Japan. Now, sure, that would have been fine. I could have stayed. It all was on a gamble of the gamble of the dice. And I don't think I could have even pulled it off if I had moved to another part of Japan. It literally required the desert in my frame of mind. Where the adventure started, this is a story that goes way, way, way past, but beyond Japan. When I first started going to the desert, before the internet even existed, back even before my daughter was born, and began to get the sense of what wasn't out there. And I needed to go away to Japan. I needed all that to happen over there. I needed to be softypapa. I needed the ban in Japan thing. I needed to lose all that money. I needed to become an abject failure in my own mind, and have a hole to climb out of, and to clamber back all alone and out there into the wastes all by myself, to face down in great danger the thing that wasn't there, and then to come back and climb out of the hole. And now I'm out of the damn hole. Sure, I mean, I'm vulnerable. I mean, I could give an aneurysm or a heart attack at any moment, but my affairs are in order, my relationships are sound, and my life's work is complete. Bring it on. Yeah, I'm ready to go. And I wouldn't be ready to go. And hopefully I'll get another decade or two out of this and squeeze it out and go back to Japan, where I will be a new man, having done this, and ready to face that down, like better prepared than I was at 24. The young man that I was at the very first time I went to Japan, which wasn't 24, I think that was more like 20 or 21, couldn't hold a candle to who I'll be now. And I'm not bragging. If it sounds that way, oh well. I want to show you this. I want to share this by way of encouragement, that getting old and being defeated in life doesn't mean that life is over. We can climb out of that hole. Yeah, but it takes courage. It takes a willingness to risk, because there's lots of places where I could have slid right back down into the hole and never got out. But that's why I wrote the book. The book's a guide. That's why I do these damn videos. That's why I do the Good Life meditation every day, because I'm trying to share this good news, so to speak, that there is a way, and it doesn't require any faith or superstition or abject giving up of one's reason in the face of hope. It just requires a lot of hard work and a willingness to face down the empty. Okay, with that, let's get started. Well, I don't think I'm done with this sentence yet, right? Okay. To perceive the great indifference clearly, you will need a desert, and you will need to go far, far beyond your own edge of deep water. Give one last look. Didn't I read this already? Before you proceed. Do you see it out there? If so, then now what? Read on to learn how I answered this peculiar question in my own life, which is the substance and subject of my own book and story. I'm sorry if I read that already. But first, let's meet the cast of Going Alone. So now, after that, it's one after another section of like a title. Like first we're going to talk about the Siberia ghost town, and then on and on and on, all the way to the end of the chapter. Here we go. And so every now and then I've got a quote. Siberia ghost town, and a quote. Alas, how 'tis with you that you do bend your eye on vacancy, and with the incorporeal air do hold discourse. That's William Shakespeare from Hamlet. Perfect. Going out into the ghost town to hold discourse with an emptiness. Siberia is a small, deserted community halfway up the Mojave Grade between Amboy and Ludlow in the Southern California desert. There is nothing at Siberia now but ruins and ghosts, and even these have only enough remembrance to barely exist as rubble, dust, and fiction. Come here when you are ready to go further, but do not expect to find what you are looking for. It's not here. True, there were once people, lives, and dreams at this place, lives and dreams like yours and mine, though there is nothing more now to see at Siberia, though there's perhaps much yet to discover and learn, but only if you go alone, and only if you find your own Siberia. Next, BNSF Railroad. Siberia Ghost Town owes its existence and history to the Burlington Northern and Santa Fe Railroad, the tracks of which run just north of the crumbled stone ruins of the ghost town's former train station. While nearby Route 66 has all but died, the BNSF remains a thriving concern, with mile-long freight trains, the longest in the world, I believe, passing east and west several times every hour, day and night, breaking the desert silence with thunderous locomotives, heading up a long string of heavy freight trains, moving slowly through the desert. The locomotives proceed always on their way through every desert town and siding, even the ghost towns, by issuing 4 blasts of the lead engine's deep resonant train horn. 2 long blasts followed by a short blast, and then a long last bellow as the train approaches and then passes through the lonely Siberia Railway crossing. These trains are irregular timepiece and reminder of what we have left behind in coming here. They pass us by very closely, yet remain impossibly far, especially at night, especially when there is no moon and when the wind blows and when we wake up and we ask ourselves why we've come at all to such a place and why we came alone. Route 66. Route 66, aka the Mother Road, is now a lonesome stretch of highway running along the BNSF Railroad through much of the East Mojave Desert. This old highway is my access to Siberia Ghost Town, with the infrequent traffic along this road being but an echo of the millions of people who arrived in California by this famous and historic transcontinental thoroughfare. There is a marker facing east at the north side of Route 66, where a small dirt road leads off along the short drive up to Siberia. The marker is a large tire with the words West Siberia written on it in white spray paint. I sometimes wonder how many westbound travelers on Route 66 even notice the marker. Sometimes I will stand a short way off in the desert near the tire to watch folks' faces as they drive past the ghost town's entrance. The only people who ever seem to notice the sign, or me standing alone in the empty desert, are the employees of the BNSF Railroad, passing by in their large white utility trucks. They notice me as I am out of place in a landscape they know. The others never see me. They do not know this place, and they are perhaps too focused on their Route 66 journey, which is simply yet another unworthy distraction. Siberia Bridge, and a quote. Active in indolence, abroad we roam, in quest of happiness which dwells at home. With vain pursuits fatigued, at length you'll find no place excludes it from an equal mind. That's from James Elfison, someone that Dr. Johnson often referenced. This is the place where my muse lives, Siberia Bridge, that is, or where she followed me to before I at last caught up. We have conspired a lot down here, the two of us, as if we are really just one. Such an idea. The bridge was our shelter and a catalyst to thought, away from the reality, masking the quite stark and terrible truth it took me 50 years to find. That's why I couldn't find it in Japan. There was too much of that masking. I have some personal things stashed down there in the rafters under the bridge, not anymore. A chair, a camera, a tripod, and some chalk. You're welcome to these things if you find them. You won't, because I already took them away and threw them away. As they are a bother and a clutter to the simplicity that I first found here under the old road. The underside of the bridge can be a scary place to go when you are alone, especially at night. I would not want to go there if I was not already me. If you do go, well, you know, go alone. There's nothing down there now but the writing that remains on there. But that big hurricane that came through last week, hopefully a big flash flood came through. I checked the rain, the whole place was saturated with rain. Hopefully a big flash flood came through and just wiped all the chalk away, and every evidence of my existence there under the bridge has been wiped clean. I love it. I love the idea of every element of my existence being wiped clean. Like, I don't want a grave marker. I don't want an epitaph. I don't even want a funeral. I want, if I could, just take my body and throw it I just dispose of it somehow. Just, take it out to sea and dump it in the sea or something like that, and then never have any remembrance of my name or anything, any reminder. I want to get rid of in like 9 or 10 months. I'm going to be living on the road. I would just love to take all of the things that are my memorabilia, all the treasures, and get rid of them. Just the only things I don't want to get rid of are the things that I want to pass on to my daughter. The family photos, those belong to the family, not to me. But all the stuff that's mine, all the stuff like last year I took in my softypapa hat that I've been dragging around for 10 years or so, the nice leather kangaroo hat. I finally got up the courage. It took courage to go, and I just put it in the trash and threw it away and slammed the lid down. It's great to put an end to myself at every chapter of my life, and so I can move on without the hindrance, without being, all that stuff all stuck on me, right? That's kind of how this feels as well. I want this bridge to go back to the way it was without any remembrance that I was once there. The path of wildness, that's next. The bounds of knowledge marks and points the way to pathless wastes where wilder sages stray. That's a quote from John Courtenay. The path of wildness is both a place in fiction and something real. I first developed this concept while living in Japan and while exploring a wilderness landscape too civil and tame to reveal the deeper truth I would later come to know in the wilder places of the American desert. I even remember exactly the place and moment that I came up with the term, the path of wildness. It was coming down from the white whale area, the white whale hike area, walking down the farm road from there, and I was coming around a corner, and it just dawned on me, the path of wildness. It put it all together. And that was the start of the whole thing. When I realized that, I thought, oh, I should write that down. And that eventually became this. The path of wildness is both a place in fiction and some place real. I already read that. I would later come to know in the wilder places of the American desert. The path of wildness is symbolic of our courage in moving forward along the riskier courses of life, where such direction seems the way our intuition suggests we should go. It takes great courage to step upon the path, which is a way untraveled, uncertain, and unforgiving. Yet the rewards are sometimes, though not always, worth the risk, especially to those who no longer seek the gain. That's important. But of course, we can go this way only when we muster the courage to move forward alone, as there is no path of wildness to be found while in the company of others. Do not go if you are very scared. Please consider this as my warning, as what you might surely lose along the way may not be worth the journey. That is your loss. Throughout this book, I refer sometimes to paths, trails, ways, and sometimes roads. I use these words carefully and deliberately. I use them to describe passage through life which is safe or sane or familiar or perhaps alien and strange and remote. Trails, ways, and roads are places where we follow others and where we are not likely to encounter anything which our species has not already met. Such places are seemingly tame and civilized and somehow sanctioned by virtue of their past passage of others, even if that passage was long ago and forgotten. Even the slightest hint of another of our kind will spoil the way, but only if you do not want to find what might otherwise be there. When we step off any road, trail, or way and begin moving, preferably walking, alone, then we disembark from the comfort and reassurance of precedent. We leave behind our guides. We forget to follow. We begin to move on the path of wildness. After returning to America in 2014, I discovered that the path of wildness in fact exists as a short stone-lined walkway in the empty desert surrounding the deserted ghost town of Siberia. You can go there and walk the path now, leading from nowhere to nowhere. Only do not expect the journey to end where you want, or where the path peters out, or anywhere in particular at all. And for best results, only go alone. The Sandman's Bed. And a quote. But desert spaces and atoms invisible. Lucretius. The Sandman's Bed is a place I discovered during the anxiety hike, which is described in the chapter of the same name in this book. The Sandman's Bed is an area of rough badlands made of decomposing granite, furrowed by a maze of flash flood channels carved into the granite through eons of weathering and erosion. The area is immense, and often without wind, and very still, with very still and silent air. I cannot convey in words what that stillness and silence is like out there. You'd have to experience it to know. The only thing I can possibly liken it to would be the inside of a tomb, preferably an underground tomb. And not that I've ever been in an underground tomb, but it's the closest thing I can imagine. And an almost unsettling quietude. The sand within the twisting, bone-dry stream beds here is soft and easy to walk on, softer and easier to walk on than this even. And while the loose and weathered granite surrounding these dry watercourses is solid, it is nevertheless slippery like marbles and slick like glass, and thus potentially quite dangerous to cross. This is a place where you are likely to trip and fall, or twist an ankle, or pull a tendon and become unable to walk. This is also a good place to come to meet and get to know the side of yourself which maybe didn't expect a universe without intrinsic meaning. Now, I explicitly you chose that word intrinsic there. Look it up. Not integral, but intrinsic. Or that you didn't know that you could be so lonesome with the idea of a universe chock full of empty. Do you think you can weather the silence here? Can you maintain your equanimity in the face of such unsettling peace and quiet? Do you dare take off your shoes when you are so far alone in the Sandman's maze? To then lie upon the sand and close your eyes and see just how long you can keep your eyes shut. I dare you. I dare you. 5 minutes. Come here other than alone, and you might as well have never come at all. Dare you. No, I don't. Don't go there. It'll kill you. But I just in theory, it's a lot harder than you might imagine to do what I just described there. I've done it twice, and I think I could do it again now for a third time and do it better than ever before. I could probably do it routinely now, but not 5 years ago or 8 years ago. Heaven forbid in Japan. In Japan, I would never have gone. The man I was in Japan would never have gone there. Would have turned back at Siberia, would have gone on and turned the camera on in some blustery, silly place somewhere else. Oh, so glad I got away from being softypapa. What a dead end that was. Well, I'm going to be softypapa again when I go back, but it's going to be softypapa version 2, right? So it'll be me now, and it'll never get me again. I'm confident of that because there's not enough life in me left, right? I'll be old and decrepit, but before I'll be sitting in my rocking chair chewing my cud before I'll have a chance to burn out again. And I don't think I'm going to burn out again. I don't. It's like climbing above the clouds. In a mountain range, and now it's above the cloud level, and it's clear, even when it's cloudy. It doesn't mean I don't have bad days. It doesn't mean that life isn't hard, but it's nothing like before. It's not what's the word? It's peripheral. Now, the difficult days are peripheral. They're like the weather. They're external. They're not internal anymore. Before, the difficulties came from within, and I didn't know what to do with that. Now, it's like having a cloudy day. Well, okay, I'll put on a sweater, or if it's a sunny day, I'll put on some sunblock, right? Whatever the heck that is. I can do something about all of that. I couldn't do something about it before because it was from within. That has been addressed, if I do say so myself. And I did. Mount Wildness, and a quote. A fool's eye wanders to the ends of the earth. Proverbs 17:24. Boy, haven't I learned that one. Mount Wildness, and by the way, Mount Wildness is a fictional place. I actually came up with Mount Wildness in the desert. If you look at, I've got a very obscure YouTube channel called Gird Speak. And there is a video on that channel. I think it's called Being Pursued on the, you just look up it on the, if you look it up on YouTube, Being Pursued on Mount Wildness, or Being Pursued on something like that. Look up the Gird Speak, G-U-R-D-S-P-E-A-K, Gird Speak. Gird Speak, and then, and Being Pursued, it's a lifeguard driving past, Being Pursued on the Far Side of Mount Wildness. I think that's what it is. That's probably where I first came up with the idea. I mean, I don't know if I called it Mount Wildness though. Being Pursued on the Far Side, but it was this idea. I think I did call it Mount Wildness. And that video is very haunting. It's for me. It foreshadows everything that happened when I came back to America. Look it up. It's kind of wild. It looks like I've never done marijuana or any drugs in my life, but it's the kind of thing I might have made if I had been a stoner. That whole channel is weird. Okay, Mount Wildness, I already did that one. Mount Wildness is my perennial destination and a place where I have never been and will never ever arrive. At least you'll never hear it from me. Okay, now there's a categorical, there's not a categorical, there is an exception to that, okay? I have no problem with the idea of suicide if I get to the point where, for example, I am going to die, maybe stage 4 cancer. Now I want to say this, and I want to be respectful for those that have gone through such things or that may be going through such things. This is my, having not been through that situation, this is me thinking through that process. If that was the case, rather than have my family go through the expense and the pain and the hardship of watching that happen, I would rather just make one last trip into the desert. Now that's fanciful. I don't know that I have the courage to do that. And furthermore, I probably will never do it because I'm a family man and I don't think my wife or daughter would understand. I've talked a little bit about them. Emily's old enough, almost old enough where I can start to talk with her about such things. Although I don't want to disturb them. Like I would not want to leave my wife and daughter or anybody else that cared about me. I mean, I know what it's like. I remember when Eric committed suicide, what that did to me. I wouldn't want to do that to anybody else. And if just buckling under and saying, okay, I'll just take the reasonable amount of medication and then give me enough morphine so that I'm not in pain and then it's peace out, I'll do that. If that's going to let my family deal with that, the better the possible. But if none of that was on the table, if I was just totally single and alone and just had this camera, one day I would make the video and say, I'm off, and I would go on one last hike into the desert, and that would be the last that anyone would ever see of me. That would be my dream, my plan, so to speak. And Mount Wildness would be my destination. I know where it is. I know exactly where it is. I've never told anyone else where it is, but that's where I would go to die. So that's the only time. I've never been there. I never plan to go there unless I get to that stage, which I won't because I'm a family man, so enough said of that. I imagine Mount Wildness as having two sides, the near and the far side. And when that video, that Gird Speak video, it does talk about the near and the far side, I believe. And by the way, in that Gird Speak video, the Being Pursued on Mount Wildness, is me being chased from the far side to the near side. With the near side being the place I could actually approach in relative safety, while the far side is an impossible distance I might indeed someday reach, but from which then I might never fully return. Okay, just another one on that one. There's a video I have out there. It's one of my favorites. It's a very long video, well over an hour, of me finding this abandoned farm way up in the mountains. It's a haunting video. It's the last place I went before I came back to America as well. If you watch that video, there's a point where I leave the farm and I take the camera and I go way up the trail past believe it or not, a hydroelectric facility that the farmer had built. And I follow it to the very end to a waterfall where there was once a bridge that went across. That to me is the juncture in Japan between the near and the far side of Mount Wildness. There's no way in hell I was going to cross over that waterfall. Don't even know if I could. I probably could have figured out a way, but anything beyond that, far too far for me then, far too far for me now. In the desert here, there's a place called the Valley of the Soulless Beasts out in the Deepwater Wilderness. That's as far as I've gone, as far as I'm going to go at this point in my life, unless I said before I could somehow find myself needing to go there. I could actually, I imagine Mount Wildness as having two sides, the near and the far side, with the near side being the place I could actually approach in relative safety, while the far side is an impossible distance I might indeed someday reach, but from which I might never fully return. Mount Wildness became a real place to me after I came home to America. In Japan it wasn't real, it was just a fiction. After I came home to America and identified a very remote mountain in the East Mojave Desert as the likely peak, the one I just mentioned. I later concluded I was wrong and have since identified a new and much more distant peak, further and more terrible, as the real Mount Wildness. So there you go, I put you off the trail, right? It is my goal to hike to this mountain before my life is done. No, it isn't. I changed my mind. I ain't going there. But it was my goal when I wrote that. But I'll never tell anyone what I find there. Going to Mount Wildness may be the last thing I ever do. I'm not going there. Maybe I will. Maybe it'll be the last thing I do before. No, it won't be. I won't go there. I ain't going there. Unless it's to die. Next, the Woodsman Cabin in Campo Number 1. And a quote. When I'm there, I hate it. When I'm here, I miss it. It's a paradox. That's from David Hempelman Adams. The Woodsman's Cabin is another place which I dreamed up in Japan. The idea probably began as a result of the many abandoned farms, and in particular the forgotten and dilapidated old farm sheds, chock full of old farming tools, which I found while exploring in the deep mountains of central Japan. There was something about these deserted places which suggested past care and concern by humans, and the subsequent loss of any consideration or remembrance even. There is an emptiness about such places which in some ways is deeper and more telling than the mere nothing we can sometimes, and sometimes only, sense while alone in very wild places. This is the atmosphere and character of the Woodsman's Cabin, a token of the wonderful warmth and love of what was discovered in contrast to and within the cold embrace of the emptiness which will forever be. So that's kind of a touchy-feely way to describe the Woodsman's Cabin as I perceived it in Japan, which was a real multiple places. It seems like I was always out there, especially doing abandoned Japan stuff, finding abandoned farm sheds full of tools. They were the mark of past love, care, and civilization, touch of civilization in the wild. Now, that was in Japan, now in America. Campo Number 1 is a very real place and the remnant of a former desert mining site located at the edge of the deep water wilderness. It and the Woodsman Cabin are central to the story of going alone, as these real places are the last real frontiers of connection in my own adventure before entering a place I call the Valley of the Soulless Beasts, which is too distant a place to visit in this book. It's funny that I say this, I say that Campo Number 1 was central. I probably give less than 15 words in the whole book to it, but it was central. It was the embarkation point into the deeper area leading up to the Valley of the Soulless Beasts, which I never mentioned in the whole book except this one time. I reached the Valley of Soulless Beasts after I wrote this book, and it became a point which I really don't talk about, and I probably never will, which is too distant a place, like I said. I sometimes use this lost camp to overnight at when exploring the deeper desert. It is a good place to rest and sleep and remember what we are now and what we must soon not become. It's probably one of the only places that if anyone ever actually went out there looking to retrace my steps, they might actually find Campo Number 1. And if they find Campo Number 1, you could probably find the rest. It would be like Everest Base Camp. The Deepwater Wilderness, and a quote. Dr. Johnson. So let's put in the character of Dr. Johnson. Deep, resonant voice. But what must be the solicitude of him who should be wandering among the cracks and hollows, benighted, ignorant, and alone? Dr. Johnson. The Deepwater Wilderness is a real place, though the name is one I came up with myself. Honestly, I do not know what this place might be properly called, as it seems at once too unremarkable and uninteresting a landscape to be worthy of a name all its own. But I gave it a name nonetheless. You can get to the Deepwater Wilderness by first going to Siberia Ghost Town. Just plug the ghost town's name into your device's map application. After you arrive, start walking towards those low hills to the north. When you get there, then get ready, for what is beyond those hills is harder than it looks. That beyond is the deep water wilderness. Are you ready for a swim beyond the depths? Beyond your depths? Just how long can you tread and keep your head above water? This is the landscape where the desert killers live. The killer is there when you expect it should be, but also perhaps when you might not. The only real sanctuary here is the home of faith, which I have defined and described a little further in this book. But even faith cannot keep you alive or intact if you are too trusting, bold, or foolish. The deep water wilderness is someplace you should never bring any such nonsense. You have been warned. It's an earnest warning. The edge of deep water, and a quote. Therefore, the door of death is never closed to sky and sun and earth and sea's deep waters. No, it stands open, and with vast gaping mouth it awaits for them. Lucretius. The edge of deep water is where you can fairly safely go from Siberia, if you simply want to glimpse the empty without much risk of the empty glimpsing you. Never go here during summer, though, as you really will not make it back. You'll die. However, during almost any other time of the year, just go to Siberia Ghost Town and then walk north for a mile or so until you reach those low hills. Carefully climb the hills, and when you reach the top, then look north out over the edge. If you go to the highest point in these low hills, then you can stand in my own footsteps, for whatever that might be worth. I wonder if you will also feel my fear while you stand there. Look north and down now from where you are. That place down below is where the last part of the anxiety hike took place. You are standing now at the very final point in the anxiety hike chapter of this book, at the very place where I point out that you can see Siberia once more, You can finally see safety again. You are out. You have made it. Described as though coming from that chapter, right? There is a watcher down there, described below, in that twisting canyon just below you, watching even now, even 100 years after I write these words, down and a little to the east. Can you find it? I have left something there for you in case you try. I did. Though the watcher is watching always, it will never see you, as there is too much empty blocking the view. If you are lucky, then this same empty will soon become apparent. But to your own view, this is the great indifference, which begins here. Those black mountains dead ahead, yet very far, they are very far, in the distance, that is a place to go. But remember always the desert killer, which can easily find you from this point on. There is sanctuary here called the home of faith. Can you find it? I never did, and I died without knowing, just like my father before me. A very, very worthy death, if not without some accepted risk. The Muse, and a quote by Dr. Johnson. I sat down, and by the way, this Dr. Johnson made this, I remember this one, he made the context. He was on his trip with James Boswell of Scotland, of the Scottish Highlands and the Hebrides, and he was riding a tiny little horse, a donkey or something like that. Imagine Dr. Johnson's great shape on a little donkey, and he had come to they were resting by a little stream, and there was a little, kind of like a little hillside there leading up into the, I guess it's called the heath or something like that, or the moors. And Dr. Johnson penned these words. I sat down to make notes on a green bank with a small stream running at my feet in the midst of savage solitude, with mountains before me and on either hand covered with heath. I looked round me and wondered that I was not more affected. But the mind is not at all equally ready to be put into motion. I was amazed that Dr. Johnson wrote those words. Not a man who was for the wilderness or for going alone or anything like that. The man who said, the man who tires of London has tired of life. To write those words, and a very suitable entry to the Muse section. Now, of course, a muse is that voice of re-inspiration in the Greek tradition, the 9 muses that would sing to our mind, the inspiration that gave us poetry, literature, and art. I first learned of the muse through literary references, though she did not start speaking to me, or at least I did not begin to hear or notice, until my early to mid-20s. At that time, her voice was more youthful and optimistic, full of new promise and hinting at the rich and varied life of potential to come. Was she fooling me then? Or perhaps was she simply as young, dumb, and innocent as I? Yeah, that's it. Our work product together then was an expression of an outlet for a rich fecundity of thought, both buoyant and light, and characterized by an animate energy that was my right at so young an age. All that is gone. 99% of it, all that work I did back in the time has been thrown away. I have just a small little bit left over. I got rid of everything. Kind of like Dr. Johnson. He burned almost everything that he ever wrote. All we have left is the things that other people published. Just 3 days before he died, he put it all in an incinerator fire. Now my muse is older and seemingly more mature. Her attitude is one of optimism, though she tempers this with an almost cold and naked inflammatory confession that she was never alive to begin with. All those years of warmth, that was simply me embracing myself in the mirror, that's why I've thrown it away, holding my hot mortal being to myself while pretending there were 2 of me, myself and my muse. Now I know there was never the muse, and it was always just me, and now I feel my end is coming soon, and for this reason I no longer lie. The muse is nothing. Her impression is my own want of something more. Her inspiration, my vain expression of lasting substance and eternal life where there is none. My muse is a corpse, my own corpse, a recognition of death before I am dead, and a decision to live while there is still some time left to be alive. Now I keep looking over to the left. I'm wondering if the mermaid lifeguard is going to come today. I don't see her yet. The ghosts of Siberia. So Siberia ghost town, Baghdad ghost town, up there by Ash Hill. I think that's called Klondike ghost town. Not really a ghost town there, just a water stop. There are graves in the desert. The people who died there before the modern period, before the 19th century, early 19th century, early 20th century for that matter. Early 20th century. And you can find their graves. So this is homage to that. And another quote by Don Johnson. Not Don Johnson, by Dr. Johnson. The graves are very numerous, and some of them undoubtedly contain the remains of men who did not expect to be so soon forgotten. He wrote that, again, on his tour of the Hebrides, touring a graveyard and a ruined church. The ghost of Siberia. These ghosts were suggested by the presence of graves I've discovered at and around various ghost towns in the eastern Mojave Desert. Though Siberia Ghost Town does not have a proper graveyard, there are nevertheless a few stone monuments which appear to be graves, scattered here and there in the surrounding desert. These markers suggest the memory of people who once lived here and who made this place home. These are the ghosts which haunt my thoughts whenever I come here alone, remembered, in fact, by no one. Well, I guess I count as someone when I remember them. And I guess you count as someone when I describe them to you and you remember them by proxy. The great indifference. We finally reached that bit. Okay, and here we go with another quote. Is there none out there to respond? No one at all? No one in the abyss, nor under the heavens shell? Henrik Ibsen. This concept is central to the entire story within this book. The great indifference is the book's last destination, and someplace, remember those 4 layers I said? The great indifference was the last destination. The great indifference is the book's last destination, and someplace from which I have conspired an escape. That is the somewhat hidden punchline of the story, that we can meet something in nature so awful as the great indifference and then carry on living good and meaningful lives without either denying or hiding from the fact of what we've not found or making up stories to dispel and quiet our fears. The idea of encountering the great indifference is that when we go far enough alone into nature, we may discover a type of emptiness and void which is both awesome and unsettling. It is this vista of disinterest which I call the great indifference. It is a recognition of no love or caring in nature beyond what we find with one another, as well as with the few select species which have evolved to become our companions and friends. Other than with these, there are none who truly care if we live or die, thrive or suffer, or even if we find peace with the wholesale recognition of just how truly alone we really are. In short, the great indifference is the recognition of a universe devoid of the wishful presence of a loving God, or any others besides our members, other members of our species, or our pets, who might have some capacity to love and to care. The great indifference is a place utterly silent of evident meaning. It is also suggestive of our own capacity to create meaning by our own willful decisions and efforts, to reclaim some sense of meaning from the awful night. Disclaimer. There is a problem with this term, the great indifference, in that the phrasing suggests some context, or, by the way, this paragraph and the next paragraph, I wrote these after I wrote the whole this whole section here. Because I just kept thinking about it. The great indifference, there's two qualifications that that someone could call me out on regarding this. I really need to discuss them here to anticipate being called out. So here they are. That's why I call them disclaimer. Disclaimer. There is a problem with this term, the great indifference, in that the phrasing suggests some context or character from which indifference might emerge. Namely, it suggests God. And I do not mean that. In fact, I mean the exact opposite. I perceive no God out there in the deep desert, and the arguments others make for God being real are clearly weak and contrived and poorly reasoned, constituting little more than a thin veneer of pretend, masking the necessity of faith to hold aloft ideas more vacuous of truth than fiction, more empty still for the very fact that believers accept the fantasy as true. And the irony that I created a term to describe a universe seemingly devoid of God, which then winds up backing me straight into God, it may be a deistic God, but a God nonetheless, does not escape my attention. And honestly, this fact frustrates me a bit. It is a problem of language, an issue of vocabulary, as I cannot quite find a better term or phrase to describe the universe's seeming uncaring or incapacity to care without then implying something with this very capacity to care. I will live with that. Another problem with the term the great indifference is the fact of us. We are part of the universe, and we are certainly not indifferent. In this way, the universe has indeed acquired the ability through us to become either interested or indifferent, at least insofar as we and other sentient species on Earth like us exist, and through the possible existence elsewhere in the universe of other forms of sentient life. In this way, the universe is clearly not indifferent. Yet it seems that the vast infinitude of the universe does mostly match my original meaning of the great indifference, insofar as this term describes what I perceive through my quite limited sense and cognition to be an enormous vista of emptiness and uncaring, which serves as the backdrop and context for every aspect of our lives. We avoid staring into this deep empty by way of our incessant busy living, punctuating our moments with innumerable distractions and entertainments. And in living this way, we fail to see what is not out there, not loving or caring about us, in fact, may not be capable of loving or caring about us, or even knowing that we are here. And by ignoring this great emptiness and void, we then run the risk of perhaps attributing more to the universe than might be warranted, dreaming up fantasies of significance and eternities of joy for the good and damnation for the bad, which the universe mutely implies are hardly real or even utterly false. So I will stick with my term, the great indifference, partly because I cannot think of a better phrase, and really because it's exactly what I'm trying to say. Now, I know that's wordy and long, and I wrote this as an addendum, so it didn't come out quite the way it's like a hasty postscript, right? But it conveys the message and tries to cover my ass. At least in my future, my ancestors will if anybody picks up this book, my great-great-granddaughter or something will say, but did great-great-grandfather think about this? Oh, yeah, he did. Okay, yeah, at least I tried my best. A few times, I'm still talking about the great indifference. A few times in this book, I reference a place called the Volcano Wilderness. This is a place about 30 miles west of Siberia along Route 66 and near the town of Newberry Springs. This is the very first place I spotted and almost recognized the great indifference. I almost said those words. To get there, simply drive to the end of Gasco Road and park near the fenced gas pipeline workyard. It's to the left. Do not worry, nobody is likely to bother your vehicle there. Get out and begin walking south and uphill towards those low black mountains in the distance. It's a long walk, a very long walk. When you reach the mountains, then find your way up and to the left. When you arrive at the top, then look over the edge. That thing you do not see down there, that is the great indifference. But do not bring anyone with you unless you are only after a difficult hike. This is also the area where I brought my daughter and where I found those human bones mentioned a few times in this book. Although, in fact, given that I've stated it so clearly and how to find it, you probably won't see it because I ruined it. The soulless beasts. In a quote, "Man that is in honor and understandeth not is like the beasts that perish." That's Psalms 49:20. A class of animals which include me, who wander the desert wastes beyond the pale memory of, I'm talking about the soulless beasts, right? The soulless beasts are a class of animals which include me, who wander the desert wastes beyond the pale memory of what once was alive and loving at and around Siberia Ghost Town and other desert places like it. Well, that's a long sentence. The soulless beasts are strong and full of the base energy and determination which characterizes nature in places which humans have forgot or never cared to love. The soulless beasts typically emerge at night, being most active in moonless dark, which fact hides their living and camouflages their determination from any minds which might suspect something more to life than simply staying alive and getting our genes into the next generation. The soulless beasts display both purpose and meaning of a sort, while trotting, crawling, slithering, or flying along the path of wildness. I know what it is to move among their midst. I know when I am with them, alone, what it is like to have no soul. I remember that I too have no soul. It's best to find the soulless beasts at night. The desert killer. For all things soon, and a quote, "For all things soon pass away and become a mere tale, and complete oblivion soon buries them." Marcus Aurelius. Death stalks the desert lands at all times, though most particularly during the very hot and very cold seasons, when life can be either burned out of us from within or evaporated away in the shivering cold. In either case, the killer does not care about anything we might feel or say or do or pretend while our living is slowly drawn out and then away through either an excess or absence of temperature. Death, then, is nearly always present and persistent in the desert. Death never cared nor cares. The summer killer lives in the east and arrives at dawn and stalks the waste boldly throughout the day and after mid-morning, retreating only at night and sometimes not even then. The winter killer comes from within, though its breath is the cold outside night wind and its touch the caress of cold outer space looming with empty behind a thin veil of breathless atmospheric night. Beware these two killers wandering the seasonal wastes. Avoid their paths. Stay clear. Your death is no matter to them. They are not real and are incapable of care regarding life or death. Yet they're real. My little God. And a quote. All men are equally afraid of death when they see it. Only some have a power of turning their sight away from it better than others. Pasquale Paoli. My little God is so small, and by the way, I always type my little God lowercase g. My little God is so small as to be almost non-existent. He lives with me to remind me of the things I fear and which I am tempted to invent solutions for in order to make the fear go away. My little God gets angry when I doubt or ask questions or consider other opinions. He wants me to follow him, though he has no real idea where to go, and would rather sit at home all day or even hide beneath the covers of my bed. I make an effort to write his name, God, G-O-D, in lowercase letters, though if he could read, he would surely see this as my sacrilege. I do this to him as a deliberate insult to his feigned importance and contrived consequence. It is an expression of my disdain for his petty, mere, and very slight existence. An existence only within my mind and when I think of him, and when I call his facile cheat. I have made a home for my little god there in the wilderness. It is just below the edge of deep water, below that place I previously suggested you go. To look across and over the place you should probably not go. It's true. My God lives out there right now. My nephew Parker delivered the God to the desert with me. He knows where it is. But be careful if you ever try to go out there again, Parker. That's just on the edge of the deep water. And don't go out there in the hot months. You'll die. So will you, anybody who goes out there. But it'd be hard for anybody else to find but Parker. But it sits out there now. My little God is very real. He came with me from Japan and lives now in a small hole above that sandy wash leading into deep water from the dangerous abandoned mine shaft. See, I told you where it is. Check the holes. If you find him, if you find my little God, then tell him, please, that he is not true, and then leave him alone there to become forgotten once more. Maybe that's part of the reason why I hardly even bother myself with this stuff anymore. Even though I read the Bible every single day and I'm vastly interested in religion, it's been put aside like my little God in the desert. It's like just nonsense notion now. Hardly worth even being given any thought to anymore. The howling. Quote, he found him in a desert land and in the waste howling wilderness. Deuteronomy 32:10. The howling is actually, before I get started, the howling is something that I came up with in Japan, and that might be in that Gerd Speak channel, the howling on Mount Wildness. There might be another video called that. The howling was something I came up with that is the sound on the far side of Mount Wildness that really scares the crap out of me. The howling represents the place which is further and beyond the point where I know I can venture and still hope to return home sound and intact to my family. Part of the fear was that it wouldn't just kill me beyond that point, but I would come back mad. It is not that whatever is out there making the howling can necessarily hurt me, though it certainly isn't harmless, but instead that once I reach that place, I can probably never fully return. Something of me will remain there always, or I will die, or become extinct, or will become extinct like a lost memory, or of something that once was and will never again be. So while I have no plan to discover the source of the howling during the course of my otherwise sane and sober living, I do hope that chance will allow me one last fleeting glimpse before the final light of my living is extinguished for good. I do not think I can successfully hear or locate the howling unless I am very, very alone. I've since changed my mind since I wrote these words. I don't give a damn about hearing the howling ever again. I don't give a damn about going out into the desert. I don't give a damn about approaching Mount Wildness or apprehending the great indifference. All I really want to do anymore is to live a virtuous life, to enjoy my days with my wonderful wife, to watch my daughter grow as an adult, do whatever she's going to do, to share words that I hope might be helpful to others to find peace, and to have a little vegetable garden, and to take long, long walks every day. I want to get up in the morning and head out with my backpack, my little backpack and my book, and to go water the footpaths of Japan all alone, and then to come home having lunch wherever, thinking thoughts, not even writing very much, mostly just thinking and experiencing life, and then coming home in the evening to my wife and spending the evenings together. Or maybe not even coming home, but just walking, and then just, if I want to keep on going, just find a little hotel someplace and spend the night and just keep on walking and come home someday. Yeah, so to hell with hearing the howling anymore. Had enough of that. The watcher. But the rebellion, a quote, but the rebellious live in a sun-scorched land. Psalm 68:6. And if you're thinking, gosh, it's a lot of Bible quotes for an atheist. Well, I read the Bible a lot. It's a really important book for me. I enjoy reading religious texts, particularly the Bible, because it's the foundation for so much of my own culture. So in so doing, I find a lot of good quotes. I can mine a lot of good quotes to use in my writing. There's a lot of good stuff in the Bible. The watcher is nothing more, and I've talked about the watcher a couple of times. Remember I said before that things will come up again and again. The watcher is nothing more than a pile of stones atop a small rise adjacent to the southwest flank of the hill I call Black Mountain. This name, watcher, came after I first spotted the stones of which the watcher is made during one of the earliest hikes in the area. I'd been about a mile away at the time and could see atop the rise what appeared to be a solitary human figure, imagine my surprise, standing looking my way. This sight was quite unsettling at the time, as I was convinced I was alone there and could not imagine another human being anywhere nearby, let alone someone so clearly watching me. I was really freaked out when I first saw this. The figure never moved throughout that first day, and I soon determined it was nothing more than a pile of placed stones, probably a mining claim. Return visits to the area confirmed my suspicions, as the watcher was always there. He's probably out there now. And when I at last paid him a visit, I found the site was indeed nothing more than a long-forgotten pile of stones marking the site where a miner had once suspected some mineral riches might be found. It is interesting to know that the stones which the miners so carefully placed here remain still in their assigned positions so long after the hand which has set them has certainly turned to dust. The miner. The miner is the last, though not the final character I've so far met within the Deepwater Wilderness. You will find him atop a small ridge about a quarter mile from the spot where the canyon leading up from the dangerous abandoned mine shaft begins to open and widens into a landscape of color. You need to refer to the chapter later in the book called The Anxiety Hike, and it says here, see the section of this book titled The Anxiety Hike. Also, if you find the miner, you're really close to the home of the little god. The miner is there, off to the right, maybe not looking at you, in fact, perhaps looking at nothing, but there and looking nonetheless. I would imagine this miner might be the last familiar figure I'd see in this la-di-da-da. If in this life should I someday find my end out there beyond deep water in the heart of the Black Mountains, or maybe amidst the Sandman's bed, or perhaps even out there somewhere in the distant vicinity of Mount Wildness. That's my not so hidden allusion to suicide, if I need to, by way of desert. Which, like I said before, probably something I won't do. If you just came into the video, you're like, what? That would be suicide if life required, if life got to that point. Like I'm just add a disclaimer there, like I had stage 4 cancer and it's nothing but pain and misery and expense for my family. But I won't do that because I don't want to bring additional hardship to my family and dealing with that kind of out from me. So I'll just probably just go out with whatever the practical way is. But I have this fantasy of going out that way. This is not the end I want, though it is also not an end I would not want. There, disclaimer there. And so the watcher and the miner are basically the same. They're both piles of stone marking the spot, probably within a half mile of each. And the miner in particular is very close to the home of the little god in the hole. The Homunculus. And a quote. Aye, but to die and go we know not where, to lie in cold obstruction and to rot. This sensible, warm motion to become a kneaded clot. Now, who else could write that but William Shakespeare? The homunculus is nothing more than that little man or woman who lives in our heads and who peeks out at the world from behind our eyeballs. It is the small person who pulls the levers and pushes the buttons of our mind, guiding us along and steering our body and brain through every circumstance and decision. The homunculus is the one who suffers when we fail, who rejoices when we succeed, and who stands accountable for every consequence of the fact of our life. This little person is trapped in our heads, cannot get out, and will die when we die. The homunculus sometimes fools itself into thinking it can and will one day escape our cooling corpse. It tells itself that there is a way out, A hatch somewhere perhaps, to admit it away from the end of our mortal being. The homunculus has no idea where this hatch is, or any clue about how to undo the binding straps which hold it secure within our cranium. But never mind these facts, it will survive. We simply know this is true, though we have no idea how or why. Some homunculi, though, prefer not to be fooled, and they look out at the world not as a temporary passenger prepared to embark to somewhere new, but instead as a trapped and bound mortal, counting down the months, days, and hours to an untimely end. Untimely insofar as it wants to go on, but knows it cannot. For this reason, such homunculi are sometimes reluctant to close their eyes. Why sleep now when there is still some light? Why rest when there is yet living action to perform? Why die when there is still some possible time to live? This is the homunculus, the little mortal within our head, the one little life we get to live, a life of living and living of one, a very true and real example of going alone, but only if we recognize there is no apparent way out. Oh, the home of faith. We've reached the last one. The home of faith. The home of faith is a dark and quiet place. I should give a little context here. It's actually a cave out in the desert. It's not far from the miner. Just go a little bit further north. You can't miss it. It's up there on the wall. It's a cave that some miners dug into the side of the mountain. It's pretty nice in there, although it's a little dangerous to get up to it. From the home of faith, if you get up into it, you can turn back. You can see the miner, and you can see exactly the spot where the little god lives in its hole. But I, of course, being me, I made the home of faith into a lot more than that. Oh, is that the light? There she is, the mermaid lifeguard. She's here. How sweet. I know her name, but I won't give it away. She's just climbed up to Tower 18. She's doing her gear. I'm going to go for a swim in a moment. She'll go in for a swim as well. I won't say hi to her. She's a young, beautiful young woman. I'm an old man, and there's nothing less seemly than an old man approaching her. Although I did approach her that one time to tell her about the blog post that I made about her, and she gave me her email address and so that I could share it with her. And she told me she liked it, that it made her smile, and I won't bother her anymore. But there she is. How wonderful. Okay, the home of faith. The home of faith is a dark and quiet place. There's little sound or sunlight here, where the stone walls are as thick as a mountain and the darkness within the cave as deep as any hole might expect to get. The way in is easy. Just decide to believe instead of pursuing doubt, and the portal will open, and you will stumble or fall some impossible distance, some impossibly near distance into a dark depth you can hardly comprehend. It is then very hard to get out, even if you do find an exit. Once inside, it is tempting to continue retreating further until the disturbing noise of reason which sent you here becomes silent at last. Then, once you can no longer hear, you will be satisfied. Though you will also really be quite alone. Alone with your confidence, which shines with only the dimmest cold light. There is no real warmth here, though there is a sort of comfort. A comfort you can get used to over time. The cold comfort of faith. This is, after all, the home of faith. Beware that. It is the same comfort of the grave. Linger here too long, and you too may become just another living, buried corpse. I'm particularly proud of that particular section right there. That really captured, for prose at least, non-inspired words. Deliberately written words. I was able to capture what I wanted to say there. I'm going to finish this section with a bit of writing from my friend George Stokes. He sent me this after receiving the book, and I think I sent him the book, or maybe he just watched these. He sent me this poem, and it's a transitional poem I use between that and the next chapter, which is called The Writing Bridge. It's beautiful. So this is George's poem to me to add to the book. Well, he didn't actually send it to me to add to the book, but I decided to add to the book because I thought it was perfect. George is just this incredible man. Yeah, he's a friend. He and I are friends on social media, mainly Facebook. George Stokes, he's a truck driver, poet, artist, philosopher. He's everything that I would have sought after when I went to college and looking for professors. When I was in college, I wasn't there for the degree, I was there for the professors. And whenever I found a professor that I really liked, I would go to every class that they offered, whether I was enrolled or not, and just sit there and soak it up. George would, if he had chosen the path of becoming a college professor, he would have been that man for me. I would have gone to every lecture that he wrote. And I really do enjoy his posts. Here's George's poem. These are the furnace lands. These are the burning wastes. The apotheosis of desolation and solitude. Rocks and thorns baking under a lunatic sun. A lizard scrambles, alarmed by the shadow of a circling hawk. This arid wilderness thick with ghosts where mad prophets wander in the gin gyre and dance. The empty promise of water in a wavering, distant mirage. I came here to this place where all hope dies, a lonely, forsaken death. I came here like I always do, for this is the wellspring of imagination and thought. My harsh mistress muse, hunkered down under this bridge, my refuge of shadow, my fortress of silent solitude. I stare out at the glaring day and wait for inspiration or madness. Either one is good. G.L. Stokes. And I'll close with that. Thank you, George. That's a really great way to end and segue and commence to the next chapter. Okay, let's see if there's any comments before I continue. She's up there changing now into her swimsuit. Here she comes. She's coming out in her swimsuit. Okay. I like to watch her in the water. That sounds weird, doesn't it? I don't mean it that way. Oh, there's lots of comments. I haven't talked with you in a while. Okay, yeah, we saw that one. Did I hear the word ghost? Yeah, you did. The ghost of sabotage. Hi. Personally, I want my body to be sent out into space because if I can't travel space when I'm dead, alive, I might as well do it when I'm dead. I don't care if I slam into another planet or a star. Solus. EO. I don't know what that means. It sounds like Latin. We all change and evolve. I don't think anyone will ever understand anyone else's choices. I think I'm far beyond my depth in my own Siberia. This is the ghost of sabotage, continuing on. The heart of faith is your own heart. How many pages is the book? Well, let's see. 300 or something? 306. We all have ghosts. Are you looking forward to grandkids? Yeah, I'm not particular. I mean, I'm kind of indifferent to grandkids. So, if either way. The Bible has some good teachings, even for us atheists. Yeah. Tartret says, great. Ghost says, you're so sweet. Ha. Kurt says, Kurt. Ghost says, Kurt, you're a shoulder. What's that? Scholar. Oh, scholar. I appreciate you. Thank you for today. Oh, you're welcome, Endless Waltz. And the ghost finishes with solus. Eo is Latin. Oh, yeah, what is that? Excuse me, I'm spitting. I walk alone or I go alone. I walk alone. Isn't that a song like from Glenn Campbell or something? I walk alone. Speaking of it, let's get ready to go in the water. I'll turn the camera off before I do that, but let me show you guys the water. Let's go walk. If I try to go down there, I'll lose the connection. But there it is. Lots and lots of surfers out there right now. And I won't show you that she's not out. There's Tower 18 and the lifeguard's in there right now. The mermaid lifeguard. She's going to come out in a minute. She's going to do her swim. And then I'm going to go out and do my swim too. So let's just put this down for a second. Before I do my swim, I always do my Japanese exercise. I'll hold my microphone, you can hear it. I can't remember it, it's been so long. Dun, 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 I have this memorized. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. I know this is long. Dun, 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 dun. Here's the part.